not heard it too much. I have no idea. Okay. See you around.
It's really easy to get very tired when you get that.
All right. All right, let's try that again. I know it says, anonymous IETF 122 session. I'm not going to, the one that actually says Jose is still on my desktop, but it's got the right agenda in it. So we're going to go ahead and use these slides anyway. So ignore the anonymous session. This is the Jose working group. Yes. We'll call it, if we were in the context of right, maybe we could call this the secret working group. Undisclosed. That was too many versions on my desktop, I guess. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is that time. This is a much smaller group than we had in Dublin. So welcome to the IETF Jose Working Group. We are using the notepad that is linked from the agenda. We could use some help with notes. Do we have any volunteers to help fill in the notes? Note takers, please. Two or three of you could do it in partnership. Nobody is looking up at me. They don't want to meet my eyes. You will help when you're not presenting. Thank you very much. Excellent. So this is the IETF Notewell, which you will have agreed to when you registered for this meeting. It includes all of the processes and procedures and rules by which we operate. If you have any questions about this, please talk to somebody in leadership. Perhaps Deb, our area director, would be happy to take care of that. In addition, there's some additional note really well. So I'd like to remind everybody that this is a professional meeting. We expect everybody to behave in a professional manner. And so treat each other with respect and cordiality. Looking around, I see a lot of seasoned IETFers. So you know the in-person and remote ways of operating. So be sure to sign in for the session since we appear to have at least 31 signed in so far. This is our agenda for today. I expect it to go pretty smoothly. And is there any agenda bashing? Go ahead, Tira. Well, I was going to speak to your two.
Hey, good morning, Thiru. On the 8th one, PQT hybrid chem HPK with Jose and Jose, it went through adoption call recently, and the chairs had decided that they will take it up after the Jose HPK goes further.
You're saying it went through an adoption call in the COSI working group.
Yeah. And the chairs had decided to take it up after the COSE HPK makes progress and reaches working group last call. They will issue a working group adoption for that later.
All right. I just went ahead and put it on here because it was something I was tracking.
Sure.
And
I mean, if this working group has the appetite to take it up, I don't mind basically because it discusses both of the ones. And
okay.
the draft, we have addressed all the comments basically. So it's up to the chairs to decide which working group wants to pick it up basically.
Yeah, no, it's fine if it's being picked up in COSE. Just be sure to send the copy this mailing list with any.
But they will take it up after the COSE HPKE draft makes progress once it reaches
Okay.
working group last call.
So when
So
that
they're
time,
not going to adapt it immediately.
okay.
Right.
I'm having a tiny bit of a problem at hearing you. I think it's the echo or something. So
Can you hear me better now?
yes.
Okay. So the draft is not yet adapted, right? The chairs have decided to put it on hold till the COSE HPKE makes progress, basically.
Okay.
So then they were going to pick it up. The draft number 6, PQ chems for Jose and COSE. We just have to do one more update, and after that, we're going to wait for more comments from the working group.
Okay, perfect.
So nothing to update on that.
Since you're helping to take notes, can you just write that in the minutes for those 2 drafts?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other agenda bashing, we will move on to just as a procedural comment to the working group. It's generally my practice to put all of the working group documents that we have, the things that we're paying attention to, on the agenda so that we can at least find out that no progress has been made and what the next steps are. So if you're a little bit surprised to see something on an agenda, that's why I tend to do it that way. There's different ways of operating, but that tends to be what I've done. So, Mike? Let me just click it for you for this one.
Good morning. So let's talk about the JSON Web Proofs documents, and in particular, what's happened since we last met our heroes in Dublin. Oh, no, I'm talking about the wrong deck right now. We're going to talk about fully specified algorithms. Ignore that man up front that said the wrong thing. The fully specified algorithms draft, as you'll recall, before Dublin went through a second working group last call, we did substantial updates to address the feedback received. We then, after Dublin, received a Shepherd write-up by Karen. We received an area director write-up by Deb. Deb's was substantial in that it requested significant changes. So Ori and I thought about it for a little while about how to best do the significant changes, and then we did them. And they actually aligned with what some people in the working group had been saying already. Probably to Brian Campbell's delight, we deleted the appendix on fully specified ECDH. So there's nothing about what you might do other than some text in the body of the encryption section. And the encryption section used to have a bunch of text that Ori wrote, which tried to explain how encryption works. And that was the thing that Deb said basically too much. And other people in the working group had been saying that's too much. So I took an axe to it and cut out all the text that tried to say how does encryption works, because we have other documents like 7516 that already say that. And instead only talk about when an not invited expert, when a designated expert is thinking about registering new encryption algorithms, how do they decide if they're fully specified? So that's what remains. Also, there was a comment by John, which we'd just frankly forgotten to address earlier, which I had flagged a long time ago, that John pointed out that HSS LMS, which is a registered COSE algorithm, is not fully specified. So we added that to the list of things that are not fully specified that we didn't do anything about. We published. Directorate reviews have come in, all saying ready or ready with NITs. Deb started the IESG review. As of an hour ago, we didn't have a telechat date yet, but I know she's on it. But it looks like we are in good shape. That is my progress report. And I will say, I think the draft is better now for having cut down the stuff which was too much. Questions, comments?
Nope. All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
The HPKA with Jose is next, but we can just switch them and do Jason.
No, that's fine.
Good morning, everyone. I'll give update on the HPKE with Jose draft. Yeah, from the last IETF, we got several comments on this working group. So we did several revisions. I think we leave around 5 revisions. I think we recently published 07 as well to address some of the comments that we received from the working group. Just a quick reminder on how things are happening. So we have 2 modes, basically the new mode, HPKE, JWE, integrated encryption mode, and the already defined key encryption mode. So if the encryption algorithm is DAR, it means it's JWE integrated encryption mode. And if it's an AID algorithm, right, for instance, AES-GCM, then it's basically key encryption mode. So the text was updated to have better clarity. Yeah, so these are the changes that we did majorly for the key encryption mode. The protected header is passed to the HPKE AID. The protected header encoding remains consistent with the existing JWE formatting rules. We did not make any changes to that. So when all the recipients use the same HPKE algorithm to secure the content encryption key, then the JWE protected header would be using ALG. Otherwise, the JWE protected header must not use ALG because each of them are using different algorithms. So the text was updated to give a better clarity on that. Right. And this was more clarity text as well to claim that the recipient JWE encrypted key must be the ciphertext from HPKE encryption. And the HPKE plain text must be set to the content encryption key, which will be encrypted by HPKE. And we also added clarifying text that the processing rules for several parameters like ciphertext, AAD, tag, IV, and DNC are already defined in RFC 7516 to make it obvious for the implementers. Yeah, and more clarity text on integrated encryption that the ciphertext must be base64 URL encoded ciphertext in alignment with the HPKE specification. The HPKE AAD parameter must be set to the JWE AAD, which includes the protected header and the JWE AAD. That's already defined in the JWE spec. Right. And since integrated encryption is a new mode, we had to specify like what happens if you have zip parameter, like we do support zip parameter for integrated encryption. And the same steps that we have in JWE are also applicable for this mode. And the JDBC encrypted key will be carrying the encoded encapsulated key that comes out of the HPKey EM-cap. Yeah, so we also updated the security consideration sections, basically to address any threat vectors that would be possible. Basically to avoid using the key across key combinations, right? I mean, if the key is used across key combinations, there's potential that if one of the algorithms gets compromised, then it would adversely impact the other algorithm combinations as well. And to avoid using it across modes like key wrapping and content encryption. And to avoid using the same key for different algorithms so that we can avoid cross-protocol attacks. So it's more clarifying text to ensure compartmentalization of the keys so that they are specific to an algorithm suite and not used across COSE, JOSE, or any other protocols. Okay. Authentication using asymmetric keys. I mean, this one is we basically updated saying that authenticated chems is not recommended to be used with key encryption because authenticated chem is only providing data origin authentication for the content encryption key, but not for the message. So that was the reason to say that it's not going to be recommended. But there's discussion happening in, I believe, in the CFRG that since authenticated chems are not being used by any deployment so far, HPKey spec may get updated to remove the authenticated chems, in which case the draft will be updated to remove the authenticated chems section altogether. We use short algorithm identifiers as per the JOSE naming conventions. And then we also updated the HPKey keys to JDBC keys, basically mapping the JDBC algorithm to the JDBC curve points, which are already there with EC and OKP, so nothing new there. We added a table for that. Yeah, I think we have, I believe, only one issue to be addressed, which is the draft currently says that the HPKey setup info must be set to an empty string. It currently matches the COSE HPE spec, and I believe they are also planning to update their draft. So one of the plans that we have is to create a new header parameter to carry the value for the HPKey setup info. We believe the draft is ready for working group last call after addressing the only pending issue, and any comments and suggestions are welcome.
Philip, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Randy, could you please speak very quickly, hopefully, towards the use of the DIR algorithm identifier? Because as far as I know, this is currently registered only for the use in the algorithm JWE header and not in the encryption algorithm.
Yes, and we are making an update to that. Do you see any issues with that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you elaborate on the issues?
Sure. So there is not a fully specified algorithm. It's not an AEAD on its own. It doesn't fall in line with the existing values, which are all AES ciphers.
Yeah, the integrated encryption mode is a fully specified algorithm. So there was no need to specify. I think the working group went through several discussions whether we need ENC to be set to any value, we can just ignore that, or do we want something to be set? So like, it was discussed like we could just piggyback on the existing one.
Okay, at the very least, there should the draft should probably update the description of the existing IANA field to make it, or the existing value to make it applicable in the ENC header parameter. And maybe while doing that, you'll figure out that it's not probably something we should be doing. But I'll yield to the next one in line. Hi, Brian. It's good to see you.
Hi, Philip. Along the same lines, there has been some discussion in this working group about this general thing, but I don't think there's anything close to agreement or consensus towards what's in the draft right now. The ENC field in Jose is defined by the base RFC as a AEAD symmetric encryption algorithm, which no encryption most definitely is not. And I have raised concerns about like what that looks like to override functionality like that and how that might impact other specifications or implementations or the various sort of assumptions that go into things that existing implementations around what you can expect from an AED algorithm and then turning that into nothing at all. And it, so kind of similar to Philip there, I don't think we've had discussion or agreement on that. It's just sort of been, feels like it's just sort of been waved off, and then we put dir in this draft, which is problematic for a number of reasons. One is you've also said you'll update the base specs, and the document doesn't do that. It just talks about it. So if you're gonna do something that we haven't agreed on, you should at least follow the procedural stuff to make that right. But that's not a suggestion to do that. It's to not do this at all. And also, like, dir is already a main key management algorithm. So it's super problematic and weird to use the same name in two different contexts for similar but different constructs. And then how that might, if this happens, which it shouldn't, ends up in the registry itself, that's gonna look real weird and be really misleading. So
Okay.
those are a lot of words there to say. I don't think we're close to working group last call, and I don't think that feedback, particularly around this particular issue, has been responded to, heard, or come to any sort of consensus or conclusion.
Yes, I think in the past meetings as well, we had proposed several options, right? There was no consensus on that, right? So I guess what we can do is the authors can discuss and come back with a couple of options that would work, right? We don't want to break existing implementations. That's not the intent, right? One option, like you suggested, we can go and say it's updating the existing JDBC spec, or the other option could be we can define a new value, right? Without having, instead of DAR, we could put something else, right? Because anyway, it's a new mode, right? It should not cause any conflict. But I think we will propose that. I'll have a discussion with my authors and then take it to the mailing list and pick one which the working group agrees to, and then we can update the draft accordingly.
Okay.
Thanks.
I feel like, yeah, just observing over time, it feels like those things haven't actually happened, or the content of the discussions hasn't been reflected in the actual content of the draft. So I'm hopeful that.
Yeah, it's been
things will
happening
be
for quite a while, if you remember, right? We had several options, and like the working group kept on discussing, nothing was nailed on. We picked one, right? I think now that we have probably identified like 3 options that we discussed, we can start there and see
Okay.
where we conclude, right?
All right. Thank you.
John Matson, with my chair hat off. You used the term authenticated chem. Not sure there is such a thing. Like HPG defines authenticated PKEs, and then with chems you can build authenticated key exchange. But yeah, just a minor terminology.
Yes, I think I'll fix the terminology, but as you know, HPKey has 3 modes. One is there's a base mode. There is a mode where both the sender also can authenticate back to the receiver, and there's a PSK mode basically, right?
Yes, but the HPKE is not a chem, it's a PKE. Public key encryption. HPKE is not a chem.
Yeah.
It uses chems for some things, but not for the authenticated mode. The authenticated mode uses a Diffie-Hellman interface, so they like deviate from chems.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Mike?
Mike Jones. To Philippe and Ryan's point about integrated encryption and the fact that it doesn't use a separate AEAD encryption algorithm. That's true. That's the way HPKE integrated encryption works. No, that's not like JWE before because it's integrated. So, you know, for existing implementations, if you're going to support the integrated encryption, you do probably have to add a different flow through your implementation that does integrated encryption. To the syntax, we thought it was better to have an ALG and an ENC value, just like JWE does today, to make it more like existing JWE. But, you know, like any new feature, sometimes you're going to have to write new code to support it, and that's where this is.
Yeah, along those lines, this is HPKE in Jose and JWE. So trying to, in some sense, it's a serialization problem. In another sense, they don't fit very well because HPKE is basically one big integrated encryption mechanism. And JWE uses these two constructs of key negotiation management, key management, I think we call it, and content encryption. And so it would be really nice if when we try to place them together, we didn't break meaningful constructs or needs of JWE in ways that are super awkward, hard to understand from the specification, hard to implement without ramifications on existing code paths. I mean, nobody's suggesting that there won't be new code that's written, but there's the way that it incorporates into existing systems already implementing this stuff. It'd be really useful if that wasn't problematic or super difficult. Not that no new code will be required, if that makes sense.
So Mike, responding to that, first, I will take the action item that Philippe and you correctly gave us to write text appropriately updating the base JWE spec to explain what is different. And I will say that part of why this whole thing has taken so long, even though it's conceptually simple, we're taking an existing RFC that defines an encryption thing that's widely used in the IETF now and trying to fit it into JWE and Kazay. It's not an exact match for the flows. And I had to come to terms with that. And if we're going to take full advantage of the other work in the IETF doing HPKE, and including there's talk of reviving a small working group to update that, then we need to be able to use the integrated encryption, which doesn't match how JWE or Kazay work, but we're going to add we are adding the capability to let you use integrated encryption. Now, what the syntax is, we can go around that, and we've gone around that for a year, but getting the semantics described is something that I'll take an action item on.
Mike, I don't think the suggestion would have been to update the draft to reflect and to add text around an awkwardly used value rather than just, hey, let's introduce a value that reflects the fact that this is integrated encryption and not a direct encryption. Rather than using the value dir, make up a new value which is specific to these constructs that offer integrated encryption. I think that would be more appropriate.
If we used the value INT, would you be happier?
I would be.
I mean, that's a possibility. And
So is it
nobody,
like we pick something else other than DAR? I mean, that's what we're looking for.
yeah, that's what.
Yeah,
nobody
it's it's the fact that it's the fact that you're reusing something which is defined as something else that caused this discussion. If you just pick another value, maybe that's a way out of it. While
Yeah.
not changing the general construct of JWE where you use both the values.
I think that would be a step in the right direction. But there's also the possibility of not necessarily using the JWE compact serialization as is fully formed, because it has this, as is previously formed, because it has this construct of these two different pieces and how they map into the serialized forms. And I don't know, maybe it's a bad idea, but there was and has been the suggestion several times, at least a couple times, to look at a different serialization than just sort of cramming this into JWE. And I don't, maybe it was a bad idea, but it doesn't feel like that's really been considered at all. We're just sort of, oh, well, we're going to go ahead with this override of a AED algorithm as nothing and just proceed with that. So I don't know. If you're going to take this route, it doesn't feel to me like there's really consensus to make these sort of breaking level changes to the updates to the base JWE spec. But if there is, then you need to actually update it. And I would rather see something other than the dir name used. That would be super helpful. And some larger explanation about like that's actually happening. It's just sort of buried in there now.
Okay. John,
Thanks,
did you
everyone,
want to
for
say
the-
something, or you just, you're not in queue or anything? Okay, great, thanks.
One comment for your information, there was this suggestion to remove the authenticated mode of HPKE yesterday. Just, maybe could be good to sync with that, either leave it as is or remove them, or get involved and say that you're using them.
Yeah, as you know, right, HPKE is probably going to form a new working group, and they're planning to update the base spec itself to remove the authentication Diffie Hellman, right? In that case, it doesn't make any sense to.
There is a suggestion to form a new working group for HPKE that was sent out on SAG yesterday. This is nothing official yet, but it was from some of the authors of HPKE was involved. Yeah. The authenticated mode of HPKE in a standard track HPKE. Martin Thompson and Richard Barnes on the SAG list. SAG, yeah, and CFRG list. But that was yesterday, so nothing formal. But yes, there is a suggestion from people to maybe remove this. Should be synced with this draft, I think. One option would be to fight for them, or to remove them, or do nothing.
So just to kind of clarify what's going on, we had a request on Tuesday to possibly help CFRG by offloading the HPKE work into a separate working group within the security area. Of course, they come to us Tuesday during meeting week, which is fantastic. So what we have agreed to do is to make sure that we talk to CFRG chairs, that we organize this properly. They were going to start a note on the SAG list, which they did. And then we're going to talk about it in SAG at AOB to talk about exactly what we may do. It will be a short, the plan is, it will be a short working group, short run working group that basically produces a document or maybe 2 documents, I don't know, to handle the work that, just to help CFRG out with load. And so it's early. If what you're using here can be helped by that, it shouldn't be much of a delay because it should be quick. You know, for some definition of IETF, quick, right? So not, you know, fast, not quick.
I
Anyway.
think, yeah, my only point was that suggested charter suggested to remove the authenticated mode, and Tiro talked about the authenticated
Okay.
mode, so they should
Right.
maybe sync with each other.
So my suggestion is if you've got HPKE work that you get involved in whatever we end up doing there to make sure that we're all synced and tied up together, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, Mike? Yes. Since we deeply appreciate our minute taker, we won't rush you.
After that, I'm bringing you coffee. First, I'm Mike Jones, an independent consultant who's worked in this space for a bit. And second, I feel duty bound to point out that John's beard photo is obsolete. Brian says by at least a decade, at least. That said, I'm now going to once again try to talk about JSON web proofs. This time I may get a slide or 2 into it. Since we last met our heroes in Dublin, DW and I, are you on the call, DW? Defined the CBOR representation for the JSON proof token. You may recall, if you've been following the JWP work, that one of our chartered deliverables is the CBOR representations. We've now brought the draft up to where that's on par with the JSON representations. It turns out, unsurprisingly, that some things are easier in CBOR. You don't have to carry around base 64 URL encodings of anything, which is wonderful. Some things are harder because it's binary, and we'll get to that in a couple slides. Oh, hi, DW. Welcome. Because we explicitly type things these days, thank you, Yaron, we define media types for the JSON proof token and the CBOR proof token so that they can be explicitly typed. Now, we're dependent upon some other work, as you know. One of the primary substantive pieces of work that we're dependent upon is BBS signatures. As you may recall, right before Dublin, after more than a year of pause, we finally got the cryptographic reviews for the draft out of the cryptographic experts, which was good. And Basilos in Greece, who's the lead author on this, has done updates to the draft, responding to the cryptographic review comments from the CFRG experts. The good news, at least from an engineering point of view, is it did not result in breaking changes. So the implementation that we're using, other implementations have not had to be updated as a result of the BBS signatures updates. But meanwhile, 2 new BBS-related drafts were adopted by the CFRG. There's a blind signatures draft, which I must confess, some of this cryptography stuff borders on magic, right? How can you create a signature for something that you don't have the contents of? Well, I guess you can. And this draft is about doing that. There's also one with a kind of counterintuitive purpose, which is explicitly enabling verifier linkability between presented forms on purpose, and describes how and when you might want to do that. It turns out there's use cases for that. The main issue that DW and I have been going back and forth on is DW has this notion that it would be great if all of our parameters came from the same space, so that it wouldn't matter if something was a header parameter or a claim. And in fact, you could freely move them back and forth between the headers, which are always disclosed, and the body where things can be made selectively disclosed. And if we were starting from scratch in an ideal world, I'm sure we would do that. The draft as it is currently uses, or the draft set currently uses 3 kinds of parameters. The JWP header parameters, which are defined in our drafts, but very much parallel the Jose and Cose header parameters. We use claims from the JOT claims registry in the JSON form, and we use claims from the CWT claims registry in the CBOR form. And that works because each of them is used in distinct places. You know that if it's in a header, it's coming out of the header parameters registry. If it's in a body, it's coming out of the claims registries. But DW points out, oh, depending upon your application needs, you might want to selectively disclose header parameters, such as the issuer, rather than always disclosing it. And whether to do that is application context specific. So how do we enable that? And there's been an issue open on this since before Dublin, number 149 in the tracker. Now, DW took a stab at this in a PR recently, which is actually the following slide. There's 2 possibilities facing us. There may be more, but there's 2 that the 2 of us came up with to describe to the working group today. One is continue doing what we're doing. Use parameters for headers that are distinct from parameters for claims. The upside is that lets us keep using the rich set of already registered claims. And I'll note that over in the SPICE working group, they just, it looks like, are going to adopt a draft registering all the OpenID claims in the binary space, which is great. It does mean that different registrations are needed for different types of parameters, and that re-registrations may need to occur if a parameter can be in one place or the other. In particular, issuer is our favorite example. We have an issuer header parameter. There are issuer claims. They have different numbers in CBOR. So they're not interchangeable. Now we can fudge in JSON and use the same string names in almost all cases. So for JSON, it's probably already quasi-unified, although we can add some registry language directing the designated experts to not step on each other's values. So that's possibility one, is keep doing what we're doing. Possibility two is what's in DW's PR, which is stop using parameters from other registries and instead have them all be in our registry. But because there's already so much value in the claims parameters, maybe we would come up with a device to say, well, this is actually a parameter from this registry. And what's in his PR is, well, maybe we could start them with a colon or something and then use JOT claim names for JSON. I actually hate that. I've told DW that, but that's what's in the PR. I hate it because it would cause developer confusion and constant mistakes for the rest of time. But this is something that we want working group input on, because we have to decide whether to try to do parameter unification or not. There's a long-standing open issue about whether we keep the JSON serialization or not. And I must admit, even I was confused about this until we were talking about it in the lead up to this meeting. The thing I was confused about is, unlike the JWS JSON serialization, the JWP JSON serialization cannot represent anything that's representable in the compact serialization. It's not like JWS or JWE, where there's a signatures array or a recipients array. It's still only one thing, it's just JSON. And I gave a talk at Identiverse last year entitled "Standards Are About Making Choices." So I'm going to advocate making a choice here and just supporting the compact serialization, given that the JSON serialization doesn't add any functionality. We opened an issue about how to think about the newly adopted CFRG BBS extension drafts, the magical blind signatures draft and the per verifier linkability draft. An open question to me, because I don't know the cryptography well enough, is can these be used by JWP with no updates to JWP, or do we have to make our format somehow aware of these capabilities and the use of them? And secondly, of course, is this useful to our use cases? And this is where I'm not pretending to be the expert. I'm hoping some of you within the sound of my voice are experts and would help fill us in. Those of you who've been around the Internet Identity Workshop have heard cryptographers from Google give intriguing presentations about doing zero-knowledge proofs using only ECDSA, not a pairing-friendly curve. And they worked out a way to do that. They'd been talking about it publicly for most of a year there and at TPAC for W3C. They finally released a preprint of their paper for other cryptographers and mere mortals to read. So there's a link to that. A question that the authors of JWP have been asking for a while is, are there other currently used ZK I need more coffee, schemes that we should be supporting in the draft. This is a candidate which apparently is going to be used for Google's wallet implementation in the EU DI wallet context. Maybe we should think about this. And by the way, on that, if you know if there's any people from Google here who are experts in this, please connect me with them so we can have an in-person conversation. Now it's your turn. We're looking for feedback from implementers. We've gotten some, we'd like more. We would like feedback on the CBOR representation, which is newer. We keep threatening to add more cryptographic algorithms to increase the diversity to make sure that what we're doing is general purpose and not overly specific to BBS and the one-off things that we've invented. In particular, the Google ECDSA algorithm is interesting. You know, we're in this transition to a potentially post-quantum world. There's talk of post-quantum ZKPs. Again, I am not a cryptographer, nor do I play one on TV, but some of you may be. And if you think that there's work we should be doing there, by all means, let us know. And we'd like for some ad hoc interop testing to occur between implementations for those of you who have them. Again, talk to DW and I, and we'll put you in touch with others. So that's what we wanted to communicate in your direction. We'd like to hear from you both on the points we raised and on points you think we failed to raise. DW, is there anything you would like to add before we open up the floor?
Just added in chat that the prefix coloning for my proposal, I used a CBOR tag. And so this is one area where people who have a lot more experience with CBOR tooling, it'd be useful to know how impactful that is, whether that's something that would be considered easy or hard to deal with.
Thank you. Is there a queue?
There is no, oh, now there is a queue.
Thanks for that, Mike. You asked a number of questions through the course of that. I was trying to jot down notes to comment, so apologies for the confused thing here. But one was, I would be very supportive of only having the compact serialization in JSON and removing the JSON serialization. Just
Thank you, Brian.
note that. I don't have a strong opinion on or know enough about it to the parameters and headers versus body, but I will say it's been a long and complicated journey in general Jose, JW, JWS, JWT about what belongs where. And at times, I think it's really been beneficial to have two distinct places for both. At times, we've maybe put things in the wrong place. And I think there's ongoing, it's been confusing one way or the other. I don't know how to make that actionable for feedback for you, but it's definitely, it's an area of ongoing problems.
Yeah, it's a pain point.
It is a pain point. I don't know which of
no
these,
doubt.
I don't know which of these approaches makes it better or worse or equal, but it's definitely a pain point.
It would create different pain.
Fair. And just on the question of the Google, I don't even have the right terms for it, but from what little I understand on that, does that map well into a JWP algorithm? My understanding was it was sort of geared at existing formats like standard Jose, standard MDL, COSE in terms of issuance, and then having some sort of additional ZKP style presentation or proof. So would it even be reconcilable with this, or am I?
Well, in fact, the presentation that I remember at the previous Internet Identity Workshop, they were having the issued form be an MDoc,
Yeah.
which is none of the above.
Right.
I mean, it's in the same spirit, but all the details are different, right?
Yeah.
As
That is what I meant by
as
NDL,
much of
but yeah.
our work is. We did get supportive comments from the authors of Google in our issue tracker on potentially doing this. So they think it would be a credible thing to do. Again, I am not a cryptographer, so I would need help.
Okay.
And I can speak to that a little bit more. So probably what we're most interested in terms of JWP is having feedback on the container design. And right now we are mostly geared towards, we'll say, multi-message, anonymous credential kind of crafted algorithms. And this is not that. This is kind of use existing algorithms to create this message and do a zero knowledge proof. And so for a message in JWP, are there changes we can make that would add possible orders of magnitude improvement on efficiency over what they're having to do by running an entire zero knowledge proof over the CBOR binary contents of an MDoc in order to be able to generate basically a yes or no, this meets your requirements, and to be able to return attributes in a way independent from the original cryptographic document. We wouldn't necessarily have to do those kinds of steps if we're having them use a container and algorithms and stuff that were designed with their needs. So we want to make sure we understand that they've done amazing backflips to work with existing formats. What sort of efficiencies could we have in designing a format with those approaches in mind?
Okay.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks, D-Dub. The this is not that part of your comment was kind of where I was hung up on. So thanks for further information. Not hung up on, what I was grasping to.
John?
Agree with DW. The stuff that Google has been working on is highly tied or highly optimized, let's put it that way, for the MDoc format and even the particular mobile driver's license version of the MDoc. In conversations with them, the similar techniques could be used and even further optimized if we worked with them on the container format, but it wouldn't be exactly what they're proposing for MDocs. So they are conversations that I think are worth pursuing, as long as we don't completely distort JWP to try and only fit their particular circuit-based zero knowledge approach. The two extensions to BBS are required for being able for the European EID PIDs being able to do pseudonymous presentations, which is one of the use cases that is enabled by BBS that we can't do with SDJWT. So being able to assert that if I'm I'm providing essentially zero knowledge. I have a PID that the verifier can tell that it's the same PID across multiple presentations, but learn nothing else. So that is one of the key things that the EU is looking for from zero knowledge proofs. So we can do some stuff with the basic BBS, but we're not actually getting that much further ahead than what we're getting with SDJWT. So those two extensions for the use cases in the EU, at least, are fairly important.
John, do you have a sense of whether we can use those extensions without doing anything to our BBS representation in JWP? Or do we have to have specific knowledge of the extensions and their use?
I don't have an opinion on that at the moment. It sounds like something I need to do some more research on.
That would be great. And your current beard photo makes me much more at ease.
I'm happy that I'm making you at ease. The
To your comment about not contorting the format, we completely agree we wouldn't want to do backflips to accommodate it, but I think it's a great exercise to understand what would it take to accommodate it, because part of why we've been saying for a year or so that we want additional cryptographic formats is we want to understand if what we're doing is general purpose enough to accommodate them.
right, and
We thought about ZK snarks with some of the Microsoft research people, but that's not far enough along that it's close to standards track.
yeah, I think that having a session at the next IIW where some of those people are more likely to appear to explore the possibilities of circuit-based zero knowledge proofs with JWP would be a valuable thing to do.
Let's convene that and get them to come. See you in 2 weeks.
Is it only 2 weeks?
It's less than 2 weeks, John. Have you booked your flight?
No.
Well, you should do that.
I should probably get around to it. Thank you.
Okay, you're quite welcome. I used to do this for Kim Cameron too.
I don't know whether that's a compliment, but I'll choose to take it that way.
Yeah, thinking about algorithms. Now we have this BBS, which seems to finally make some progress in CFRG.
Yes.
And we have this suggestion for post-quantum and ECDSA. I looked at this ECDSA, seems simpler when you see that. Looking at the paper, it's quite long and quite complicated formula. Registering new crypto in IETF, if you have been following the lists, is a very discussed topics. Maybe we might be good to focus on what should we have in the initial release, so we get some RFCs published and the registers, and then we can have additional algorithms in other documents.
Completely agreed. Obviously, in the first RFC versions of this, we're only going to reference stuff that's finished standard, so there's not down refs, but there's plenty of room for extensions by using an algorithm registry, which we've defined also.
Thiru, I agree with John, right? I mean, CFRG has spent a lot of time looking into BBS, right? Benchmarking and crypto analysis, right? I don't think we should pick, it looks promising, but yeah, without any proper analysis by CFRG, I don't think we should pick one side. If there is interest, it can always be added later, but I think such algorithms should be discussed in CFRG to see, and if there is interest for research or writing a paper there, and then pursue it within this working group.
Right, and I would say our interest right now is to make sure that we can meet the needs of those algorithms rather than trying to push them to be on a standards track on any sort of timeline. So we probably would not be able to reference them, but we still want to make sure we meet everyone's needs.
We could write an individual draft with them about this is what a JWP representation of that would look like, so that we have that as a thought experiment, but not try to take it to final till it's time.
Yeah, thanks.
John Bradley, do you want to say something? Oh, okay.
I was just going to agree with DW. I don't think the Google circuit-based stuff is even less baked than Snarks. So, you know, what we have to understand is, will JWP be usable by these other techniques? Not that we would incorporate any of those techniques in the draft, but you know, there are other categories of zero knowledge proofs. We should at least do the due diligence to make sure that we're as compatible with as many of them as possible.
Exactly. And that's what DW and I had to say. We'd love feedback on the list on any of this stuff.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, this is actually just a quick, I asked him to go ahead and put together a couple of slides. The time zones did not permit Neil to participate, and I just wanted an update on the status of this document. So the summary of what's been done thus far is that it deprecates the two Jose algorithms with known security issues, it updates the designated reviewer instructions, and there have been very few comments on the mailing list. The majority of the responses support the deprecations. All of the updates thus far have been editorial. And so the question to the working group is this ready for a working group last call? So Neil's not online, but I'd like to have some discussion with the working group and whether we're ready to progress with working group last call on this document.
So Mike Jones, if I were chair, which I'm not, I would ask the question, how many people have read the current draft?
Okay, we can ask that question as well. How many people have read the current draft? So Mike, you're not one of the ones that have read it?
No, and then I would ask, can I get volunteers to? That's just what I would do.
Is this just chair coaching from the floor there?
Perhaps.
If I'm Mike, which I'm not, I would raise my hand and say yes.
All right, so I guess,
will read it.
Okay, so I guess the sense here is that you would rather us have another round of requesting reviews before we try to do a working group last call on this. So having said that, who is willing to review this document? Mike? Excellent. Brian? I am really sorry. I know I should know you. You're on. Thank you. I can see you just barely in the okay.
Because I'll get it eventually. You could put in for early reviews of it, which
Okay.
would get you reviews, right? For sure, right? Sector review, I don't know. Take your pick, right? If there's obvious directorates or whatever that would review this that made sense, then it just would get you more eyes on it.
Okay.
It's a strategy.
Yes.
You can choose it or not.
Yes. No, that is a good point, and we could do that. I'll follow up with Neil after this meeting, and I'll follow up with those of you who have volunteered for reviews. So thank you for volunteering. And this is why I put all of the working group documents on the agenda, whether there have been updates or not. So next, some people occasionally seem surprised by it. All right. All right, Tira.
Yes, I'll talk about enhanced JWE with detached AAD. This problem was raised as part of enhancement to HPKE as one of the issues, and then it was discussed like uh, this has nothing to do with HPKE, right? I mean, this is a new security mechanism that was discussed and doesn't warrant it to be specific to HPKE. So we thought, why not write a separate draft and see if the working group has any appetite to take it up, or is the problem that needs to be solved in the first place. So basically the draft introduces a mechanism of detached AAD in JWE. The basic idea behind detached AA is allowing the AAD to be derived from context-specific information, for instance, the receiver's identity or the sender's identity or any other context information, right? And this problem was extensively discussed in OpenID for verifiable credentials, where the verifier needs context information without depending on the in-band AAD. One of the threat vectors that was discussed there was the phishing attack, right? And they were looking for detached AAD so that the verifier, the relying party looks at the context, and if the context is not being met, then it would reject the JWE.
Just real quickly, having been part of some of those conversations in OpenID for verifiable credentials, definitely has not been extensively discussed there. There's a very small subsection of people that are interested in something like this and aren't quite sure where they want to get it from. So I wouldn't oversell that.
Sure.
And even the use cases that they believe they would be getting from this kind of mechanism are I think, are pretty questionable. So I just urge some caution in pursuing this.
Okay. Yeah, there are some advantages of detached AAD, right? I mean, by deriving AAD directly from the context, you don't have to transmit an in-band AAD, and it is the attack surfaces reduces because it's not transmitted on the wire, so it's not susceptible to any redirection or man-in-the-middle attacks to tamper the AAD. It gives enhanced flexibility to decide on how this AAD could be transmitted out of band, and it would work for both the compact and the JW serializations. So what we did was we introduced a detached AAD parameter to signal that detached AAD is being used to compute the part of the AAD algorithm to finally get the authentication tag computed. And if it's not being set, or if it's being set to false, then the AAD would be computed as is. But if JW AAD is already present, then the draft discusses how they could be combined. Right. So how do you derive the detached AAD is you basically identify the context elements, which could be the session ID, sender identifier, receiver identifier, any other context information. And then you standardize this AAD information in a way that, for instance, you could normalize that, serialize the elements in a canonical form, and then generate a hash out of it. And then you basically append that to the existing protected header with the detached AAD, or with the JW AAD with a separator in between. So that way, there's nothing changing on the wire. It's just that the way you compute the AAD and then use it to your AAD algorithm to be a part of it to get an authentication tag, which includes the current AAD as well as the detached AAD. Yeah, the security considerations is pretty straightforward, that both must have derived the AAD identically, and if you're using some time sensitive issues, it could result in potential mismatches. So you need to make sure the way the AAD is generated is quite consistent on both the sender and receiver. Otherwise, the decryption algorithm will fail. I don't think this draft was discussed at all in the working group, so we would first ask for comments on the problem and the proposed solution, and then probably if there is interest, we would ask for a working group adoption.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the document?
I'm not personally convinced it's really a problem, and or that this would be a good way to address it if it is. I don't think we should be pursuing this work here. And then if we did, which we shouldn't, introducing like JSON canonicalization would also be something I would hope that we don't do. So yeah, and it came up in the context of HPKE originally, trying to get some of the people that were looking for a solution to a problem that isn't maybe really even a problem, so that they would maybe be happy with the possibility that it would be included in the HPKE work here as some sort of means to have an external input into the KDF. I think it was Ilario that suggested that isn't a great idea to have different treatment of things like that across different algorithms, but I would, and I get that, I think that's a fair consideration, but I would really prefer to have something like that than a completely new extension to JWE for something that's really probably shouldn't even be worked on in the first place. I don't know how to say this. We shouldn't be doing this.
Any other thoughts or opinions? We'll accept you, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was in those discussions in the OpenID for verifiable credentials world, and there's not consensus there that this is an actual problem.
Okay. I think the challenge for you then is to find some additional support for this if you want to go forward.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
All right, thank you. That way. Stop slides. So Philip, I'll share them and then pass control to you.
Okay. Let's see if I can get familiar with the RoboClicker.
Well, if it doesn't work, you can. All right.
You've got slides control, it says. Okay. All right. Fancy. Does it work? It does. Okay, I'm gonna mute my headphones for a little bit because I hear the echo coming from the room and it's distracting. However, I will be checking the queue if there's anybody willing to speak. And if so, I will raise my volume again to hear you well. All right. Let's talk a little bit, about Web Cryptography API and its coming up extension. The extension, this is currently an individual or personal draft, but it is soon moving to web platform incubation. This is being done by Daniel Higgins. I believe he could be there sitting in the room with you. Maybe not, because he told me he's attending the SCID working group. Not sure though. Daniel is the current editor of the Web Cryptography API. And this extension defines a number of new algorithms available for the Web Crypto API, many of which we need in order to make use of the post-quantum goodness that has been brewing within IETF the past number of years. Why do we need to talk about a Web Crypto API? Specifically, why do we need to talk about a crypto API at all? And it's because there is an intersection between this API and Jose. I want to talk very briefly about how the Web Crypto API is structured and what its algorithms actually mean. The API is referred to as Web Crypto API, sometimes subtle crypto. It is not the most convenient API, but within the JavaScript ecosystem, it's the only one that we actually have, which is somewhat interoperable and available in most runtimes. In this API, keys are generated as crypto key class instances, and they have the usual type, which is either secret, public, or private. Keys can be imported from various key formats, such as the raw format for symmetric secrets, SPKI for public keys, PKCS8 for private keys, and JWK for both private, public, and also symmetric. From this crypto key instance, keys may also be exported into those very same key formats. Crypto key instances themselves have what's described as an algorithm. This can be something very simple, such as ED25519, or something more complicated, such as RSA-PSS, where for the operation you also define, for the key you also define the digest or the hash that is used. Crypto key instances are then used as one of the inputs for methods such as sign, encrypt, verify, derive bits, derive key. And those methods themselves take an algorithm too. In a similar fashion, this can be something simple or more complicated. The methods and the crypto key algorithms are different dictionaries, so they are not always the same, although they can be if it's something simple such as ED25519. So as alluded to, the intersection between the Web Crypto API and Jose is the JSON Web Key format, which the API uses to import and export crypto key material. And we want to talk about the new algorithms that are introduced and see how Jose and JSON Web Keys are looking like for these new algorithms. And my goal here is to be able to provide guidance to Daniel, who's writing the draft, so that he knows how to make the API work with JSON Web Key when it comes to these new algorithms. Starting off with MLDSA. MLDSA for the use in Jose is defined in the Jose working group in the Dilithium draft. And it creates a new building block for us, which would be the JSON Web Key algorithm key pair type. This is an interesting type because it differs from our existing types in that its algorithm is required. There cannot be an AKP JWK without an alg. This is currently pending an update to add a second optional, maybe then both are optional, I don't know. Well, one or the other is optional. Private key representation, the expanded private key representation. But all in all, for MLDSA, given that everything is aligned with LAMPS, is looking really good. The Web Crypto API will register all three non-hash variants for MLDSA, and we will be able to represent them as JSON Web Keys as well as use them in Jose, obviously. Moving on to MLChem. For MLChem, Subtle Crypto is introducing, or the draft is introducing new methods to Subtle Crypto to encapsulate and decapsulate keys. The JSON Web algorithm definitions are in the Jose PQC Chem draft. However, this draft currently does not mention the use of the AKP type at all. So this is something that we will, or I will be asking for the draft to do, to at least mention so that the API can export and import MLChem private and public keys as JWKs. SLHDSA, again, something defined by the Jose working group, uses AKP as well. Alg is required, and However, it only mentions and attempts to register at this point in the draft 3 of the parameter subsets of SLHDSA, meaning that the full set, which the WebCrypto API draft intends to make use of, cannot be represented as JWK. This means that either the API will have to omit supporting importing and exporting JWKs here, or we will have to do something about it. And what we can do about it, I will allude to in follow-up slides. Mike?
Hi, Philippe. Thank you for the presentation. I encourage you to file comments on the Sphinx Plus draft, that to the extent that you think the key format isn't covering all the use cases, ask them to do so and tell them how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The Sphinx draft does cover the usage of the key type, but it does not register all the parameter sets. It's the previous one, MLChem, that doesn't make use of, doesn't mention the use of any particular JSON Web Key representation at all. So because ALG is required for the AKP type, we cannot export the parameter sets not defined for use in JWK from this API. And this is something we've already had to deal with in the past. And we had to deal with that for AES in modes such as CTR, for which we do not have a JSON Web Algorithm definition. But in the registry, you will find A128 CTR, you will find A128 CBC even without the SHA-2 construct. And so for OCB, we could ask the author, we could ask Daniel to do something similar that the original WebCrypto API spec did, which was that it requested registrations for a particular algorithm, but its usage location is just JWK. It does not say that you can use this in an JWE Enc in this case. And for some reason, its Jose implementation requirements in the registry are listed as prohibited. I don't have the history behind this. I would like to know if you know why that is. Please let me know. This would probably be a suggestion that I would give Daniel to make this registration request, unless we figure out a different way. In this OCB mode in particular, we could even introduce a Jose draft ourselves that would make this a valid encryption cipher or AAD. Since the OCB mode, I think there was a patent question, but since 2017, I believe there is a conditional allowance for the use of it. RoboClicker didn't work, or did it? Okay. The next cipher up on the list is Cha-Cha-20 Poly 13.5. Same thing. We do not have a JSON Web Algorithm definition for it. However, its representation would be rather simple if we just make the JSON Web Key usage location registration. Mike?
Yeah, I'll observe that the beauty of the way IANA is running these registries and the way they're specified, it does not have to be an RFC that creates the JWK definition and registers it. W3C drafts are perfectly capable and eligible to do so. If they're doing that, it would be great if you and others would tell us so we can review it as...
That's what I'm doing here.
As friendly engineers.
So that's what I'm doing here. I'm doing this preemptively so that the draft can already assume that we are okay with that and we have talked about it. I did not assume that we would be writing IETF drafts or publishing RFCs for these registrations only. I fully expect the W3C document to make those registrations. When it comes to the JSON Web Key registrations, it cannot make a registration for use as an actual algorithm in either ALG or ENC, but it can make the JSON Web Key representation registration. Coming back to ChaCha20, the value here would be C20P, I assume, because there was an internet draft prior, many years ago, and I did a quick cursory search, and some libraries already use this identifier. By the way, please stop me if anything becomes controversial in here. Mike, you're back in the queue or still in the queue? Okay, gone.
Just a comment, looking at the registry, it looked like also algorithms are specification required. Or so I think I'm not saying that you should, but I think theoretically you can register algorithms from W3C.
In fact, having been there, Web Crypto did so.
It did so for RSA OEAP 384 and 512 because there were already documents that described its functionality, and it just added a new parameterized name for one of them. It did not describe a new Jose algorithm.
I'm just saying that you formally can. You said that you cannot, but I think you can if you want to.
Yeah, I don't think we want to though. Okay, and with that we have depleted all the simple ones, and we're moving to the complex one. Okay, sorry, before that, Deb has a comment.
So this question is actually for John. Have you looked up OCB mode?
Looked at what?
Have you looked up OCB mode? Is it secure? You should look that up and see what version they're using, because I don't think they're all secure.
Yeah, no, in OCB 2, I think, had some major vulnerabilities. 3
Right.
is fine.
Can you go back to your OCB slides?
Yes.
So he's talking about a authenticated, is he talking about like an AEAD mode for, because that's OCB 2.
Okay, yeah.
So you need to verify which version of OCB mode you're using.
I will pass the feedback on to Daniel. Yeah.
There's 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3, and 2's broken.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the RFC it's OCB 3.
Supposed to be 3. Okay. I have never, in fact, I had to look up what OCB mode was, because I hadn't heard of it.
Jonathan Hamill, Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. Yeah, looking at that RFC, it is OCB 3, which is the secure version.
Thank you. Okay, coming back. With that, we've exhausted the simple recommendations that we can make, and let's move on to the difficult ones. And we're starting off with the most unusual suspect for difficult algorithm is SHA-3. In the context of Web Crypto API, this is registered, or this is going to be defined as a digest algorithm. And in this API, everything which is registered for a digest method as a digest algorithm can be used in all Web Crypto API algorithms that have a hash in their dictionary. This means that there is an interaction with HMAC, there is an interaction with RSA, SSA, PKCS1, V1.5, with RSA, PSS, ECDSA, and RSA OEAP. There is, I don't have a good recommendation to give here to Daniel, other than we probably do not need an algorithm defined for all of these permutations between all of these different JWAs and their different, and the three SHA-3 digests that it's going to be using. And that's perfectly fine because the API does allow the export to not have an ALK, unless of course the actual JSON web key type requires an algorithm, which is the case for the new one introduced in COSE Dilithio. So unless we feel like we have to define, for example, PS3-256 to make use of RSA, SSA, PSS using SHA-3-256, I think my recommendation would be that the API simply exports a generic RSA key with no algorithm in the ALK parameter field. Shake. Shake is another digest algorithm, and it's even more difficult than SHA-3 because it's a variable output length algorithm, XOF, which makes its interaction with the existing constructs that are there even more complicated. I don't know how applicable this is to HMAC. Last time I tried to use Shake with HMAC in OpenSSL, it exploded. I don't know how that's going to be in version 3.5, but who knows. For RSA, PSS, and ECDSA, there is a draft that makes the interaction possible, where it actually defines a fixed length for the different Shake 128 and 256 variants. But for OAP and PKCS1 v15, there is no such thing. So again, I don't think there's any need for the Web Crypto API to include an ALK in the keys for these algorithms when they are defined to use C-Shake. And there's also KMAC. KMAC would probably fit into the very same bucket as OCB, where we just need to have the JSON web key usage location defined if it needs to have an algorithm or not, because we don't have an algorithm, JSON web algorithm definition for this. With that, I have depleted my slides. I thank everybody for giving their feedback. I will make a text version of this and send it to the list so that we can get it out to a wider audience. And then I'll be able to summarize all that feedback and give it back to Daniel to incorporate in his draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good with the early sync between IETF and W3C. Very welcome. My conclusion is that you will talk to some of the draft authors to influence their current drafts. There might be new drafts, and W3C might do registrations on their own. Would be good to sync any registrations so we don't have double registrations. I saw that you did not mention Argon 2. Was that intentionally? You mentioned it.
I didn't mention Argon 2 because it does not interact with HOSE in any way, because the keys for key derivation functions in Web Crypto API are not exportable. And I think they're not importable from a JSON web key format. So there is no intersection between HOSE and Web Crypto API in that particular algorithm.
Okay, any other?
I can't hear you, Mike.
Yes, sorry. You wanted to know that there isn't an interaction with what in the last?
Okay, there is no interaction between the Argon 2 algorithm in Web Crypto API and the HOSE, because Web Crypto API does not allow exports for key derivation function keys. and it only allows raw import, no JWK. So there is no intersection between Jose and Argon 2 in Web Crypto.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions or comments? Any other business?
I think Daniel should be in the room now. I can see him in the signed participants list.
Oh, Daniel, okay.
Yes, sorry for coming in late. I had a conflict with Skid.
Shame on you.
Yes. And thanks a lot for presenting on this here. And I look forward to all the feedback. I will also look back to the recording and the notes. I'm not sure if it was mentioned before, but I wanted to repeat that all of the interactions that you've mentioned, we might not, mandate support for all of those combinations. So I think it would be perfectly reasonable for an implementation to say, okay, we're not going to support RSA with SHA-3, for example, and then then there's also no need to be able to import JWK or export those keys, right? And then we kind of punt that issue. But also the solution you've proposed with not having a specific algorithm, in that case, seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think on the specification level, you will have to make it so that there is no algorithm if it was supported. But then, of course, the API itself allows for the algorithm itself to not be supported. So there's two levels of dealing with the issue at hand of not having to register these awkward interactions between existing algorithms and SHA-3.
Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Jonathan Hamill, Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. So on your Shake side, regarding the use with RSA, so when you're using Shake with RSA, you wouldn't use the masks generation function like MGF1. You replace that with Shake. So that's just one note about that.
Okay, thank you. I think I just copied this slide from the RSA, from the SHA-3 one. So I copied this line from the previous slide. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Hamel, Hammel. All right, so with that, we have come to the end of the session. Thank you for everybody, especially thank you to our minute takers. Anybody who has spoken or asked a question, please review the notes because they've taken some pretty lengthy notes. And if you want to ensure that your statements are accurately reflected, you should probably review them. Anything else? All right, you get an extra 15 minutes in your day.